I had the amazing opportunity to interview Jaden Waddell. She's a master's student in Dr. Barton's lab at the University of Alabama, and she's studying geomicrobiology. She's been researching some really interesting stuff, and it was a great interview. So let's begin. What is your favorite fact that you've learned in microbiology?
I feel like less of a fact, more of a skill, is all I'm saying is like E. coli smells a lot like bleach, so I can smell identify E. coli now.
Really?
All I'm saying is I think that's really neat. Did that in my microbiology class, the lab portion. One of them was the whole end project was you have to do all these differential tests to figure out what your secret unknown bacteria was, and I picked up the plate and smelled it and I was like, that's E. coli. No more tests needed.
That's so cool. None of my labs were that fun.
Once you spend enough time with E. coli, you're like, I know him. I know him too well.
What led you to do grad school?
This is funny. So when I was in undergrad, I originally wanted to go to medical school. And so I did the whole biology thing. I actually was in a biomedical science program. And so medical school is really when you have research experience. So I wanted to do a research lab to kind of get something on the resume. And I always have liked gross stuff and little germs and all that type of thing. So when I saw a microbiology lab, I was like, I'm gonna do that one. And then I did it for a couple years. I applied for a medical school because we had an accelerated program at my undergrad. And I got rejected.
Oh.
And when I got rejected from medical school, I realized I was actually very relieved that I got rejected from medical school. And I had to do a lot of self-reflection and realize that if I want to be a doctor, I probably shouldn't be glad that I got rejected from medical school. And that probably means that I actually don't like people that much, and I should probably stay in a lab setting because I really like my research.
Yeah.
So, I did the thing that's better, which is not talking to people very much and instead staying in the lab setting.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, for sure.
It's one of the reasons why I've enjoyed this so much.
Exactly. It's a lot less pressure, too. If your E. coli die, no insurance necessary.
It is true.
No malpractice.
Definitely not too bad. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you made the right decision.
Yeah, well, we'll see how we feel in about 5 years.
So what is the specific thing that you study?
Currently, I do a lot less microbiology, a lot less rocks, and a lot more organic chemistry. Oh. So I get to look mostly at the organic chemistry in the lakes at the bottom of Wind Cave. For some reason, there's actually not a lot of life in those lakes. When you think of cave water, you kind of think of dirty, mucky, muddy water, and that's not really what we're seeing down there. We actually see really old water, really clear water that is so uncontaminated with bacteria that you can actually drink it. And I have, and I didn't die. So all I'm saying is it's pretty pure, and we're kind of wondering why that is, what's so special, what's so different, why is it so isolated. So we're kind of looking at what's the environment down there, and we're thinking the little bacteria that are down there, little as in the amount, because obviously they're little guys, that they are probably just using very trace amounts of certain metals and minerals down there to make their own food, and just kind of a self-sustained little system down there.
Oh.
Very little input from the outside world.
Sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
Have you gone on trips out there?
Yeah,
Samples?
I've gotten to go on one trip so far, and then there was another sampling trip where they just brought them back for me, which was very convenient and a lot less work for me. But I think we'll be going back out we should be back out in fall, so it'll be good.
Okay. And there's something with the robot, right?
Yeah, so if all goes as planned, we should be able to have a robot out there in the lakes that would do all of that sampling for us, and it would be able to do it remotely as well. So it can communicate through the rock, which would be really convenient. Unless the robot needs maintenance, no one should have to go to the lakes anymore to really have to do that sampling trip.
Should make sampling so much easier, though.
Yeah, that would make my life a lot easier.
Yeah. So once you get the samples and bring them back to the lab, what are you usually doing with the samples?
So essentially, I kind of just blast them with bright light until the molecules in my samples get excited, and then they emit that extra energy that got them all excited, and then that energy that they emit, we can see on a spectrum, and depending on the intensity of that energy that they emit, it can tell you pretty much what compound that came from. So we can see, is it going to be full of proteins, as in proteins that bacteria are using to rebuild themselves, different parts of their cells, different parts of their DNA, or is it something more like terrestrial, like is it plant matter if we were to look at different parts of the cave, or different parts of the park even. If we look at springs, you'd see a lot more of that decay in plant matter because it's much closer to the surface, there's a lot more external input.
Okay. Is there anything else, any other part of the research that's really interesting, or
the part that I don't have time to do in just a master's, but I think is really cool, is trying to figure out how to grow the bacteria themselves, is because they think that they are dependent on manganese metabolism, but nobody has been able to grow them successfully isolated outside of the cave. So people have grown manganese oxidizers outside of labs, but they've never been isolated, and we're not 100% sure what they really need to grow. So that's still kind of a mystery, like what exactly their metabolism requires. There's still work to be done on that realm.
Yeah. Is there any hope for like industrial uses of the research later on?
I would say the big implications for it would be, first of all, that it would mostly be going into water quality research, if anything, especially because the lakes are part of a really big aquifer. That part of the country, and even up into Canada, the lakes are in the Madison Aquifer, and that aquifer is just absolutely huge, and a lot of people rely on it for water. So understanding the chemistry and the way that microbiology interplays with that specific aquifer could be really important for the way that we drill into that aquifer in the future. So that might be one implication. Also, interestingly, the way that manganese shifts through its different redox reactions, which could be microbially driven if the microbes are using it for energy, is that manganese can actually break down and capture different types of biological molecules, and they can also capture and break down different other heavy metals. So it could be kind of beneficial in that aspect as well.
Yeah, especially with the heavy metals, right? I mean,
yeah.
Not a lot of things that do that, right?
Yeah, because it would be one of those things where those would be harmful to the bacteria, and so nullifying that toxic effect on the bacteria would also be beneficial to us as well.